Before handing the floor over to the next speaker, I will hand the floor to a friend that will make a couple of recommendations. First of all, we'll meet from the 18th to the 22nd of July in Padua. As you know, CIB is partner of this initiative, and many people that are here have become friends, so it's been a pleasure to meet you again. Ecofutura is cooperating with Sergio Ferrari, Diana Payais. We've been here to disseminate the contents of this conference. I would like to ask you to help us. More than 5,000 people followed us in the videos and the interviews, so that's important to mention. Please help us see in the afternoon we can double this number and get to 10,000. So that's what you have to do. Take your smartphone. I think you all have one. And those from the biogas field are very rich. No, you poor farmers. I think you have a smartphone. So please log on to your Facebook account, but do it if you can right now. It's a very simple thing. It's a simple game, but helps us communicate. So, open the page of Consorzio Italiano Biogas. And you will see the video. And you can see the live streaming. When you open this video, there's a button on the left, share, so click on it. It's not difficult, please do it now. And the window will open up to see if you want to share it with groups on your Facebook page. So do something. This way we multiply our audience, which is something very, very important. I'm telling you, because before thinking of having a sponsor, I fell in love, not with Piero Gattoni, but with the strategy of biogas done right, which is something extremely good. You're cooperating to that, so it's worthwhile. Please share it. Share it with people who don't know what this is about. Thank you. Thank you, Fabio. Thank you also for the work done together with you, with Jacopo Fo, with the whole group of Ecofuturo. I'll hand it over to one of our companies. It's a great pleasure for me to hand the floor over to Drodossi Davide Zecchini from Sapio. Please. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to congratulate the organizers on this conference, because having 5,000 followers, I think it's extremely important. But also would like to congratulate those who are putting lots of energy in making this sector start with the utmost sustainability. So I'm really glad to be here and to present our company at this event. Can I have more slides, please? Sapio is an Italian company that is almost 100 years old. 100-year history in the production of technical gases, which are cross-sectional. They're used in every sector. The importance of the supply is that there has to be always top quality, and we have a few examples here. For example, in the food sector, where a modified atmospheric composition can improve the shelf life of products. In the steel-making sector, in the glass sector, where, of course, oxygen combustion reduces the quantity of primary energy, then pharmaceutical and chemical industry, process gases that have to guarantee the safety of the systems and the reliability of the system. Then we have a second saw of our company that is focusing a bit more on healthcare, so oxygen for hospital facilities and a number of services, for example, home care for our patients. A few facts and figures. Thanks to the excellent work carried out by our 1,600 staff in 2017, we have recorded a turnover of 504 million euros. We are present in 5 countries: Italy, Germany, France, Slovenia and Turkey. In Italy, we have more than 150 direct and indirect sites to guarantee a top-level service and closeness to our customers. And we have more than 900 installations that are operated remotely, so we can intervene in case of problems with their operation. The slide is very important, I believe, because these are the building blocks of our strategy, of our decisions. Well, security, safety, of course, is the first one, because it's a hazardous sector. So, of course, if somebody gets hurt, there's no point in pursuing this path. So safety is key. Another important building block of development is innovation, to offer new services and new products. People, so human resources, which are a fundamental asset for every company. Integrity, focus on our clients and relations. We take a step forward in our client supplier relationship, because we want to have mutual benefits. That this is the only solution, to have long-term cooperation that is profitable for all. With respect to innovation, we cooperate with the many Italian and European research centers and universities, because, of course, we need support to rely on the expertise of research centers. For several years, we have been organizing the Sapio Award for Research and Innovation to give visibility to researchers, to keep our brains here in Italy, avoiding the brain drain, so they can support our businesses. We also play an active role in the hydrogen fuel vehicles, sustainable mobility, which is very important for us. Then biomethane. We saw it already, decarbonation, renewable energy that can be programmed. The use of this technology in agriculture and sustainable mobility. Now we'll hand it over to Engineer Zecchini that will describe in detail our strategy and what's the contribution that Sapio Group is giving to support biogas producers and help them reach their final users. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. I would like to join Andrea Dossi in congratulating the organizers of this event on the great success. I've participated in many events. I've never seen such a high attendance rate, and this is, of course, thanks to the organizers and thanks to all those that are here, of course, that are kindling the interest of people when it comes to biogas and biomethane. So, biogas done right is our slogan. How can we do biogas done right? To do that, We have had a look at the supply chain, the current supply chain of biogas, and we have seen that there's lots of competencies, expertise regarding biogas production. So the work that many of you have been carrying out. So the anaerobic digester, the careful operation of the anaerobic digester, but we have also had a look at what we need more to produce, to generate electricity through biogas. It's, of course, a very simple concept. You need to burn, in quote, a fuel in an internal combustion engine to generate electricity and produce biomethane instead. So it's a process that needs competences that are way more specific, because producing biomethane means addressing the problem from the viewpoint of the chemical process that, of course, has to do with the purification of the biogas. In this context, we have highlighted that in order to produce biomethane, we need more specific competencies than the ones currently available. And so we have decided to promote an ambitious program to stand between biogas producers and final users of biomethane, also bio-GNL. The role of interlocutors is unique. What does it mean? It means, first of all, that we have to propose solutions, safe solutions, as Vice President was saying. 15 to 20 years, it's the shelf life of this process, and we have to speed up the time to market. So, from a biomethane that can be placed on the market and accessing the market of advanced biofuels more easily. With respect to plants and systems, we did two things here. We have a dedicated structure in our organization that is responsible with energy transition and sustainable mobility, with a special focus on biomethane. In addressing the different phases of the project, from the upgrading to a phase where liquid biomethane is produced, we have considered all the competencies that we have in-house, because the activity to produce biomethane is very similar to the activities we carry out with our current business. That is to say, producing technical gases, nitrogen, oxygen, the same technology based on molecular sieves or membranes, definitely the same. In the upgrading phase, what we do, approaching case by case, and trying to meet the needs of biogas producers, are to define, depending on the use of the product, compressed or liquid, and the diet of the anaerobic digester, the best technical solution. As we did with many of our clients, we entered into an agreement, a cooperation agreement, with a company that is listed on the stock exchange. It's a Canadian company from Toronto, which is specialized in filtration, purification solutions, biogas upgrading solutions. And this is part of our strategy, that is to say, joining forces with highly competent companies in a specific field. And we believe that this is a strength and value added. I was mentioning earlier the support we offer to biogas producers. Well, we believe that the project starts from the production of biogas done right until the final product, the end product. So we are entering into a partnership with an important producer of solutions for biogas, so generators, digesters for biogas. What do we do specifically when it comes to upgrading? First of all, it is important to define the solution. Our purpose is not so much that of building a plant, well, of course, but we have to design it, plan it, and operate it. So it's very important during the design phase to consider that that plant has to be reliable and will have to be reliable for a very long period of time, 15 to 20 years. That is the shelf life of that plant. So we focus very much on planning and on design because we want to make sure that a given plant do have sustainability and to be cost effective, runs 24/7. And this is very important because it's here that the productivity and the cost effectiveness of the project are achieved. And then liquefaction. We believe very much in this. We coined a new notion of virtual piping to speed up the time to market of biomethane. First of all, liquefaction is important because in order to have a good liquefaction, we have to purify biomethane. Of course, our competence is an historical competence within the framework of cryogenic condensation plants. And so we put in place all our competencies here. The plant, of course, guarantees storage of liquid biomethane. And our activity is not limited to building a plant, but it also takes care of logistics, because in our daily activity, we of course provide our products, supply our products, liquid nitrogen, argon, oxygen, liquid biomethane, similar temperatures, minus 160 degrees Celsius. So our activity goes in this direction. We want to provide a service for distribution and marketing of the final product. So Andrea, anything else to add? If you have any questions, we are ready to take them. Thank you very much.
Grazie. Complimenti, grazie. Bene.
So, thank you for this further contribution, this additional contribution. All our members are here, so afterwards we also have a chance to have a dialogue with them. And I'm now giving the floor to another one of our friends, Professor Marangoni, whom I wish to thank because on the occasion of Biogas Italy, he has worked on some figures in terms of the impact of our supply chain. And we have been cooperating for a number of years on the Altensis report. Thank you, Piero, and thank you for inviting me here today in this conference with such an attentive audience. And as your president was reminding you, we have been working together for quite a while. But I have to say that when we look at biogas figures, we are always surprised every time we do that, because it is a reality which is much more significant than it may appear among non-experts. And this not because the consortium is not good in communication, quite the contrary, but because perhaps sometimes the system overall, and I'm talking about the energy system rather than the farming one, which is the one I am more familiar with, perhaps does not devote to the bioenergy sector and biogas in particular the attention it deserves. So having said this, today I have a rather specific goal, which consists in sharing with you some figures, some estimates we have made in relation to the economic impacts of biogas and biomethane.
Tecnologia non mi assiste? Sì, mi assiste. Il biogas.
So biogas and biomethane were created, were developed for environmental reasons, but they also have a number of positive side effects. As I was saying, I will basically focus on economic aspects and energy-related aspects, while I will leave it to more authoritative effects. I will leave it to experts to speak about other types of effects. So, first of all, an aspect that is typical of renewable energies in general, and biogas in particular, is that of supply security. Energy independence. This has some implications also in terms of the security of the energy system and the power supply system, because we know that biogas is the only renewable energy source that can be actually dispatched, that is dispatchable. This, of course, also has an impact in terms of synergies, in terms of the creation of new jobs, and it also plays a part in achieving the goals set by the European Union in the energy and environmental fields.
O io parlo troppo velocemente o le slide sono troppo lente.
So either I speak too fast or the slides are too slow. We haven't quite determined which.
Forse ci vuole un tecnico che sa come mettere.
Perhaps we need some technician to help us out.
Ecco, forse così. Allora, va bene.
So, we can begin by looking at the current situation and what risks we may face if we do not look to the future. The message of this slide may sound alarming, but unless we don't look to the future, it may come true. So without policies, we run the risk of wasting everything that has been done so far. As you know, there are some 2,000 plants, biogas plants, with a 1.4 gigawatt of installed power. So we are talking about 8.2 or 3 terawatt per hour of electricity produced. So in terms of contribution to covering final gross consumption, we are talking about 2.5%. So if we look at a scenario which is called scenario no action, in other words, we leave things as they are or leave them to develop by themselves without passing any policy aimed at promoting the development of this field, of this sector, in the period 2017 and 2030, we would lose almost 15 terawatt per hour of electricity produced through bioenergy, and more than half of this amount would be the results of energy production with biogas. So this chart is quite eloquent. The blue part is biogas, but the overall trend concerns all renewable energy sources. So we now move on to slide 4. And biogas, as we said, is important in terms of its impact on the energy system, but it goes well beyond the energy aspect because it is marked by a much broader value chain, and differently from other renewable energy segments, it has a value chain which in which some sections are particularly developed in Italy. So if we look at manufacturing and planning and installation, we can then move on to financing, power generation and upgrading for methane production, and the O&M part, which has to do not just with plants, but also the entire grid infrastructure, and also the procurement part related to the production of biogas and biomethane. So all these steps, from an economic standpoint, entail a number of effects. They produce an added value, which in turn promotes consumption. So this added value promotes consumption, and as a consequence, there is a whole sector that generates jobs, fiscal revenue, and also environmental benefits. So in other terms, the entire value chain of renewable gas produces richness for the country, for our country, in many different sectors. Even though there are some difficulties, particularly with reference to some qualitative aspects, but there are very important economic effects. And if we look at 2016, for which we have data, so this has got to do with biogas and energy generation. The added value that was generated was around 535 million euros. So they represent the direct added value produced along the value chain. Indirect consumption generated by this richness produced, and the entire side sector. So in practical terms, how is this value distributed? Well, the supply of the feedstocks, we know that energy power production is the part that has the greater impact. 1/4 comes from plant management and operation, and in 2016 also manufacturing, planning and installation of plants and technologies, involves many Italian companies, but only amounts to 4% because, as we know, in 2016 installations were limited. So if we were to look at the breakdown in the various value chain sections of 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, the importance of the various components, particularly O&M, would have been a bit considerably different and higher. This is a sector that produces advantages also in terms of contribution to society in the form of fiscal revenue. So if you think about corporate taxes and labor costs, you get to over 125.4 million contributions paid in 2016. And of course, there is also a great benefit for the environment, the local areas and farming. And here we only measured it in terms of CO2 emissions, which were avoided throughout a year, and this is 3.6 million tons. But if you just look at 1 year, it's yes interesting, but also limiting, if not downright misleading. So we thought we should look at a longer period of time to try and understand what impacts we may have from now until 2030. So starting from an estimated potential of 10 billion cubic meters of biomethane development until 2030, we try to imagine 2 scenarios with reference to the use of the gas produced. In the short term, until 2020, we thought there would be 3 billion cubic meters of methane for power production, 0.2 billion used for transportation, and 1 billion fed into the grid. But if we look at 2030, 10 billion cubic meters, some 4 will again be used for power generation, 1.5 billion for the transportation system, and 4.5 may be fed into the grid. These are not forecasts. It's hypothesis of use on which we based our estimates for economic impact. So these economic impacts were not made to look bigger to make our biogas friend happy, but these are the results of a series of assessments and estimates and calculations, and quite complicated. But if we sum them up, they give us an idea of the possible impact of this sector. So don't get scared by the first table with all those figures, but let us look at the key figures really. We are talking about almost 86 billion euros of in terms of economic impact, thanks to the development of renewable gas from now up until 2030. Out of these, some 57 billion are the direct added value, so the richness actually produced in the part of the value chain that that is represented by biomethane, and indirect impacts amount to some 28 billion, additional billion. And in terms of jobs, so we are talking about over 21,000 jobs until 2030, and some 16 billion euros of contributions to the tax authorities. When we talk about future policies and incentives, when you talk about these aspects, you should also look at the other side of the public finances and in fact consider also the 16 billion euros of taxes and contributions to the national system. Here too, figures are the result of a number of calculations. We have some 16 billion concerning electric power. Of course, we consider the various uses, so power generation, transportation, and feeding into the grid. And here too, the overall added value is the result of direct and indirect effects, and the generation and production of materials used in the plants, so directly related to the farming sector, represent the highest share. So more than 7 billion of almost 18. O&M represents 1/4 of the total, and the manufacturing, planning and installation part covers 6% each. As far as transportation is concerned, we think that the added value would be 15 billion euros. With an important role played by biomethane production and refining, that would add 11.5 billion. Supply from the farming sector would be around 8%. This is the second activity in terms of importance. And here too, we see that the importance of investments is related to manufacturing, planning and installation, because this would amount to a share of 11%. Last but not least, we can look at feeding into the grid. We have here a figure of 53 billion euros in terms of added value, and this is also the estimate that is impacted on by the greatest variability, because it is related to the price of natural gas, that is obviously the natural product that would replace biomethane. The refining and production part would cover 32 billion out of the total amount, and this estimate, of course, takes into account the ups and downs in gas prices. Considered in the past 4 years, the price ranged between 14 and 27 euros per megawatt hour. So it's a ratio of 1 to 2. You cannot translate and pass this on over the overall estimate, because that is just part of the value generated, but this gives you still an idea of how much this depends on a broader context, not just that of gas. In this case too, the supply, the feedstock supply, concerning the farming sector, plays a very significant role. As to the other benefits or advantages, again, fiscal contributions are very significant. We're talking about 16 billion in the field of electricity, 1.9 in the field of transportation, and 10 in grid feeding. Over 21,000 jobs and almost 200 million tons of CO2 avoided between 2017 and 2050, because the entire calculation has been made considering all the plants until 2030. And of course, all plants will continue to work for the years after 2030. So by way of conclusion, beyond figures and beyond the estimates, that may vary over time depending on a number of factors, such as the prices of the power markets, the gas, salaries, technology costs. Overall, the basic assumption does not change remotely, and the basic assumption is that the development of the Italian biomethane potential is quite significant because the national gas production would double. Today it's around 10% of gas consumption in Italy. So we would be able to double production without drilling any more wells. The development of the renewable gas sector, as we have seen from the figures, would bring about important economic benefits. Also new jobs, more taxes paid, and an improvement from an environmental standpoint. In addition, the use of raw material or byproducts coming from farming brings about advantages, and it also protects the local territory. It has several positive impacts, and it optimizes the use of farming resources. Then, in terms of energy systems, it has an important impact because it promotes independence and promotes supply security, even though it has not been given much space in the national energy strategy, but still biogas can play an important part in Italy's approach and development in the energy sector. And again, from the standpoint of the energy system, it can promote the adequacy of the national electric grid, and it is also something that you can plan out. Now, the main risks come from not doing anything in this field, and I wish to conclude by saying that what we need is a new set of policies, and we need to do something to relaunch renewable gas. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope I wasn't too tedious because of all these figures. And if you have any questions, of course, I am here to answer them. Thank you.
Grazie Alessandro.
Thank you, Alessandro. Very interesting facts and figures. We are going to include that in the biogas measurement. Well, now, it's always a pleasure to have Davide Valenzano from GSE here. We'd like to thank Davide. We'd like to thank Luca Barberis that came here as well. Every time we meet GSA at Biogas Italy, we stress the positive cooperation we've had over the past few years and the role that GSE had in this complicated phase, a phase that led to the launch of our initiative. So the consortium tries to be a strategic interlocutor with GSE. So thank you very much.
Buon pomeriggio a tutti.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank Piero Gattoni for renewing the invitation in this conference. It's always a great pleasure to be here.
Il settore che si occupano di bioenergia abbiamo
with CIB and all the organizations that deal with energy, we have cooperated for years with a view to planning and development actions and policies as well. So we have several opportunities of exchanging views and start off a debate. I've got lots of numbers as well, so I'm sure my contribution won't be as good as Professor Marangoni's, so I'll try not to give you too many. I will just give you a few which are the most relevant to me. But there are a few key messages I would like to give you. the messages that I will submit to the panel that will take the floor after me. How we can attain these challenging objectives by 2030. We expect in the short term a new directive, RED II, a new directive that will set new targets for the European Commission, for the Member States, for Italy, when it comes to the achievement of the objectives in 3 sectors: transportation, electricity, energy, etc. Let's start from numbers. State of play of the bioenergy sector. I would like to thank the Statistical Office, in particular Mr. De Benedetti, that provided us with data that are really important, that have been used by the whole energy system. The most important numbers are the ones in green. This data dates back to 2016. 108 TWh produced from renewables, 33% of the gross domestic consumption. Contribution of bioenergy is 18%. We are referring to electricity, 18%. And it's a growing contribution. And that's the forerunner of the photovoltaic sector. If we consider the growth of bioenergy, the most important piece of data was given by biogas. The most important contribution was given by biogas. So in a few years, since 2009 to date, has obtained more than 8 terawatt hours. So it's a very important contribution that this segment has been given to the electrical system. A few more data. Also, with respect to electricity. In terms of numbers of installed plants, more than 2,700 plants, so 4 gigawatts of gross power efficiency installed at 2016. Important growth was recorded in early 2000 and over the past 4 years. In general, the average growth rate of the installed capacity was more than 10% a year. It's an average growth rate. The most relevant numbers have been given by Professor Marangoni for biogas. 2,000 plants incentivized. 1,000 regard agriculture and forestry. Installed power of biogas is more than 34% of the entire bioenergy sector, so 1/3 of bioenergy, of the bioenergy sector. Then the average size of the plants I'm referring to plants, medium voltage, 200 kilowatts, 1 megawatt. So it's plants that give energy to GSE that sells it back to the market. So the average size has to be consistent with the typical size of a farm using waste produced by the agricultural activities and then reused in the strategic assets. This is a very important point. The correct sizing of incentives. There has to be more and more consistent with respect to the energy input ability that farms have in Italy. Another important piece of data, and I will go back to that when addressing the remote heating question, is geographical distribution. Biogas is the dark purple part of this bars. Lombardy is first, we know that. This is a virtual podium. Veneto, Emilia-Romagna and Piedmont. These are important data. In these regions, Lombardy, Veneto, Emilia-Romagna and Piedmont, there are more kilometers of remote heating networks, so there's potential to exploit biogas plants that can be used in cogeneration to recover heat, to be injected in this remote heating grid, and there are already a few business cases. Then thermal and transportation. So thermal. With respect to the overall result as at 2016, 10.5 MTEP of energy consumption in the heating sector, 66%, so more than two-thirds, is from solid biomass, so firewood, chips, pellets, which is characteristic of our segment, with more than 7 million boilers of residential size available. So biogas hasn't had a significant impact on this. In the following slide, you can see that thermal energy generated by biogas is 2.4%. It is growing constantly, plus 0.8% compared with last year, well, 2015, because data is at 2016. But the most interesting piece of data is that 80% of thermal energy is the result of the energy generated by thermal plants. This slide concludes my description of the thermal sector. This is over the past 10 years. The development we observed in remote heating grids with three-digit numbers. 2013, 11 terawatt hours from remote heating grids. 68% of these grids is located in the three regions we mentioned earlier, Piedmont, Lombardy and Emilia-Romagna, where there are already biogas plants that produce heat that is injected into the grid. But remote heating still has a big room for improvement. According to a GSE study that you can find on our website, the margin for development is 30%. So not only with respect to heating, but also with respect to electricity, there's a pretty good margin to improve this business. I will finish my numbers with the transportation sector. So the transportation sector is characterized basically by biodiesel. So 97% of the biofuels that are currently available are represented by biodiesel. There's no biomethane yet. The only plant that is running was approved in 2017 and is the plant in Montello. These are important numbers. They are part of a context where the overall target was that of promoting biofuels. But starting from 2018, advanced biofuels will have to be part of the market. So there will be the obligation to purchase advanced biomethane starting from 2018, with the regulatory conditions that are changing, with the stakeholders that are going to be more and more ready. We expect that biomethane can record a boom. Sorry, we can't hear comments made off mic. Well, no, boom is not the right word. Explode, that's what he said in Italian. So maybe growing very fast would be a better choice of words. Now, what about the impact on employment and on the economy? This is still data from 2016. The slide was developed for the national strategic orientation and the national energy strategy. Let's look at biogas only. 105 million euro is the investments in production plants in 2016 for 450 million euro of created added value and more than 6,400 permanent workers. By permanent workers per million euro investment, biogas is ranking first. So investing 1 million euro in biogas means employing more people compared with other technology. And this is confirmed. It's been confirmed over the years. I hope I bored you to death with numbers. Now let's focus on CEN 2030 objectives. Well, the slide sums up the second part of my contribution. So the three goals that need to be achieved are well known to us all: competitiveness, reduce the price gap of energy by aligning with EU prices. But business competitiveness is also important to consider within the competitiveness umbrella, under the competitiveness umbrella. So by that I mean the competitiveness of our farms that are growing fast, and safety and flexibility of the system. And I will dwell on this as well, because the biogas among the known programmable sources is the most programmable of all. It can be done real time, so it can be really relevant from this viewpoint. And then the environment. We'll go back to this in a minute, which means producing biogas in a more and more sustainable manner with optimum use of soil, with fewer emissions. The goal of CEN with respect to electricity is pretty challenging. So a 17.5% increase compared with the current trend. To achieve this target of 55%, CEN relies on technology whose generation costs are lower. So large photovoltaic plants, wind farms. Maybe you can't read this graph, but if we look on the left, bottom left, you can see the average generation cost of large-sized plants. On the left, photovoltaic, then wind and hydroelectric. These are the technologies that are ready to benefit from future incentives. And the first two segments, photovoltaic and wind, well, Italy and CEN are focusing very much on these two sectors to reach and exceed the 55% target. With respect to bioenergy, the main goal will be maintaining production capacity. Because plants that have higher production costs will have to rise up to a challenge and keep these assets as productive as possible. A no-action scenario in the light of two policies was described by a colleague, but I would like to think about an action scenario on the part of the operator. So what can we do to optimize production and made it more efficient. A contribution was given in December by GSE. GSE produced a document to encourage upgrading interventions to keep the plants efficient, even beyond the shelf life of the plants themselves. And this challenge will be accompanied by a new challenge, new initiatives, which doesn't mean large-sized plants, but means smaller plants. SEN refers to 70 kilowatts, then we'll see what the optimum size will be. But basically using bioenergy from waste, so agricultural waste or second crops. So really placing more value on agriculture by reducing the emissions of pollutants. So support to circular economy, which is more and more integrated with farms. And this is the challenge for us.
Due segmenti, termico e...
The other two segments, thermal and transportation. For thermal, we said it already. We are pretty present on heat pumps, on remote heating, replacement of boilers with biomass boilers that are more efficient, fewer emissions. There's important potential for development from remote heating and biomass. Last but not least, the role of biomethane in transportation. In August 2017, a draft decree was notified. The DG Comp has followed a long process to address this decree, and now the system is more mature, meaning the involvement of institutions, of the infrastructure manager, the stakeholders, the market is more mature as well. We saw that also in the business cases presented by Sapio. The system, for the past year, was not discouraged, but important steps forward were made, and now the final piece of the jigsaw will be the one needed to launch biomethane once and for all. I would like to remind you of the main points that were addressed over the past few months, that were part of the debate, that could be part of the new decree providing for incentives. First of all, the introduction of a mandatory share of advanced biofuels starting from 2018, a target of 1.1 billion cubic meters of biomethane in transportation starting from 2022. This is the share of natural gas in the transportation sector. So the objective is to attack that share, then enhancement of the certificate for consumption of 375 euros for biomethane, advanced biomethane in transportation, and the double counting for our advanced biomethane, the dedicated pickup of advanced biomethane injected in gas grids. This is not something we are really excited about. We would like the market to be ready to sell this biomethane on the market through professionals, through the rural professionals, and we expect that integrated business cases like the ones presented by Sapio can go in this future direction of avoiding this role of support when purchasing biomethane. Then introduction to the market. the creation of a CIC market and guarantees of origin, increases to realize distribution plants and liquefaction plants, and dissemination of standard contracts. These are all the useful elements required by the system that are the result of long consultations and the works that, thanks to the work of GSE, were put in place.
Forse ancora di più raggiungere.
I will conclude. Reaching and overcoming objectives by 2030. Challenges and opportunities. This is the first message. One of the challenges is promoting the shift to fuels with low greenhouse gas emissions. Change of recipe, that's how we call these shifts.
Ma mantenere produttivi e valorizzare.
Place more value on the existing assets in a market parity logic, so without incentives. But through a number of drivers. Upgrading of the installed plants, so extension of the useful life of the shelf life of plants beyond the incentivation period, access to new forms of energy remuneration.
Diversificare anche.
Diversifying also the sources for energy produced through these assets. And finally, after incentives, there are also minimum guaranteed prices. If necessary, that's what I added, but minimum guaranteed prices, apart from the deadline of incentives, have always been a form of guarantee that can integrate the minimum profits that are needed with respect to what is already available on the market.
Del calore da biogas per teleriscaldamento, anche
Another very important benefit is to optimize heat from biogas for remote heating, to convert plants, even partially, in biomethane plants. You can see here potential up to 8 billion cubic meters. It could be even more than that, maybe 10 billion cubic meters, without reducing the potential of Italian farming, but increasing competitiveness and sustainability of farms, and then promoting the renewal of the installed plants with a low environmental impact. Apart from the national objectives that have just been listed by Sen, we must not forget that we are in Europe and that the European Union is encouraging renewables very much. Over the past few days, we have been supporting the ministries in the so-called trilogue phase, Commission, Parliament and Council. We have been addressing the objective of renewables. The Commission had set a value of 27% in the clean energy package. The Parliament is willing to raise the percentage to 35%. So Europe is still a beacon that is pushing us towards decarbonation. This is my last slide. We always like to conclude our presentations with this slide to say that renewables are based more and more on integrated vision. The old model, generate electricity and inject it into the grid, is an old business model, and I hope I've provided you with food for thought for the panel that will take place in a short while. Thank you very much.
Bene, grazie Davide.
Thank you, Davide. Especially the last part for us is particularly important because it gives us an understanding of the fact that there are strategic reasoning and which is what we must get at, because we now must try and sum things up, what has been done in the past few days, and start having exchanges with the institutions and the bodies that will then have to support the development of biogas in the years to come. In November 2013, the Italian Consortium for Biogas in Rimini made a presentation on the occasion of Ecomondo, and we have here a friend who works for Key Energy, another exhibition. So we presented in 2013 the Tor Viscosa Manifesto. This area became famous between the two wars because it produced rayon coming from hemp. So during the two wars, Italian research centers and experts in the agricultural sector and the bioeconomy already then produced this great event, and there is also a very interesting documentary which I invite you to look at. It's on the internet. And then there was the Suez Canal oil, and we know what happened. Everything changed. Oil was the driver, and as a consequence, we no longer needed farming to produce fabrics for clothes. But now we're getting back to that situation. So why is Italy sensitive to these topics? Well, because it's a tradition which we have. Traditionally, we did innovate and research farm crops to use in other purposes. So we presented a biogas plant with a little biorefinery. We were saying what was said yesterday. In other words, producing biogas is much more than producing bioenergy, which was also something that emerged from the presentation by Professor Marangoni. It's more than bioenergy because it allows us to do many other things as well. In this room, there are representatives of two important companies, Atena Snam and the authority, and I would like to ask them to come to the podium to start with them discussing these topics, our vision. So the vision of an aerobic digester as a point of contact between two different networks, and what's maybe also in the scenario shared by Davide Valenzano in terms of making things more efficient, because we don't want to have a scenario in which there are no controls and you get to the end of incentives with no real advances. So we want to plan things. We want to show that our infrastructure is strategic. We want to bring forward a project that is supported and shared. So I would like to ask our guests to contribute to the discussion. So, I wish to thank Massimo Ricci, who's representing the authority, ARERA, Umberto Berzero from SNAM, and Rosario Polito from Terna. So, thank you for taking part in this exchange. I would like to ask the President of FREE to support me in this round table. So let us have a round of applause for GB.
Continua a stupirci per la sua.
So he continues to astonish us for his vitality and his intention of, bringing forward some proposals and pointing at the road ahead. So I would like you, in your respective roles, to make an introduction. on this idea, starting from what D'Alenzano said. What is the strategy that your respective companies are identifying to align with the national energy strategy goals? I would like to Rosario to take the floor first, please. Good morning. My name is Rosario Polito, and I'm responsible for innovation in Terna. I imagine you know this company. It's a national electric grid operating company. It is responsible for developing the power network. I arrived at lunchtime and I saw that many presentations were focused on the national energy strategy. Terna, I think, has played a very active role with the authorities and the ministries in defining also the roadmap to achieve these goals. Important goals by 2030, 50% of renewables using covering energy needs at the national level. And this for Terna, it means that it has to manage an electric system that is totally different from what we've had so far. So to simplify things, if today Terna managed the balance between demand and generation in moment by moment with connected plants, big ones connected to its network. In the future, the network will be marked by many resources, generation plants connected to the grid, and they will have to do the same thing that we do today with great power plants in order to balance needs and answer demand. So Terna has identified several possible solutions, and we consider that the development of the electricity grid is essential. So demand will become active and no longer passive, and demand will also be related to generation. In other words, the scenario is totally different compared with what we have today. And then there's going to be storage. This is another topic which is in tune with what some other speakers have talked about, and also the evolution of the dispatching service market. It means that we need to have flexible resources and open up to them, resources that are also related to the distributed energy resources. So doing this at the moment is important because you cannot have an immediate transition. So we work hand in hand with the authority, and also thanks to the decision number 300, we decided we will move forward on a step-by-step basis. So last year we launched the first pilot projects, because this decision states that change can be gradual and it may take by promoting pilot projects. So Terna and the authorities qualify and validate a pilot project presented by a third party. So what did we do? In 2017, we launched the first calls for proposals. So we had the first pilot projects which were marked by aggregate resources in terms of reduction, and also separately we looked at consumption. But this year we're also going to have mixed aggregations. In doing this, we are actually implementing the first measures put forth by Terna to radically reform its dispatching service market. So if there were to be pilot projects that are based on integration between different types of networks, like the electricity network, the remote, the district heating network, etc. Within this decision, they could be presented and also be qualified by Terna. So we validate a step-by-step approach. As a company, we have also been working on storage. But we have resorted to totally different technologies with certain types of batteries, projects with 50 megawatts. We've used various types of technologies, but similarly, we can also work with other partners to assess pilot projects of different types as the ones we were discussing. Our last consideration, I think, has to do with technology, because Terna's role has to be transparent with reference to technology. So we are neutral, basically, because what we must do is allow various resources to enter a market that is not just based on services, but also other aspects. And then prices have to be fair to allow the various types of resources to take part into the market. Thank you for your contribution.
Grazie.
Bene, molto interessante questo aspetto.
So these aspects of storage is very interesting, and also this fact that you are technology neutral. But then I would like to ask now Umberto Berzero from SNAM, is it appropriate to think that the gas network may be a storage for over 240 terawatts? Yes, we can do that. Okay, yes, and please share with us what you think concerning the national energy strategy and the role of SNAM. Well, I can begin by saying that I am surprised by the interest raised by the audience concerning the potential of green gas. And this is something that is also quite evident at the European level, because what has emerged is that the contribution that green gas may give to the decarbonization pathway, which is quite relevant, particularly in Italy, because the national energy strategy has identified very strict targets, particularly in the power sector. And this has been explained very clearly to the audience. So as a representative of SNAM, I can say that the gas infrastructure must play a fundamental and synergic role in achieving decarbonization goals. And in this pathway, along this pathway, the potential which we have in Italy in terms of biogas, 8 or 10 billion, which was the amount pointed at by CIB. They may seem large numbers, but let us consider that the development of biogas today in Italy has reached almost 3 billion in terms of the production of gas over just a few years. Between 2012 and 2015, we almost achieved 3 billion in terms of production. So 8 or 10 billion production by 2030 is not really necessarily a big figure, or a figure that it may be difficult to achieve, quite the reverse. So in this sense, the gas grid is one of the backbones in terms of energy in this country, in addition to the power grid. So it's a possible, it's a synergy between these two systems that can promote decarbonization. I'm glad you spoke about not just biomethane, but also about the potential of power to gas. Let us not forget that in the national strategy, those objectives or goals that have to do with the development of types of renewable energy sources such as solar and wind, which cannot be planned ahead, are also related to overproduction, because the gas network grid can be used as storage for overgeneration, but the development of batteries is quite limited, as we saw in terms of power. And it does not make it possible to store energy in the long term, so seasonal storage, the possibility to exploit overgeneration when it's there, particularly in the summer, particularly when there is a loss of wind, if this is turned into molecules of energy, so basically gas or hydrogen, better gas, because it's less dangerous. And we spoke about it this morning. But anyway, in our opinion, is the best way to be able to generate a synergy that will have to be developed between the two energy backbones of the country, which are the electric and gas grids. So this is the only thing that is going to allow us to achieve certain goals and also promote the development of the overall energy sector. So this was illustrated also this morning with the Gas for Climate project. But anyway, I deal with energy scenarios. I'm always saying my opinion, but this is actually the view of the company I work for, of course. So what we could do in addition to what has been done with the National Energy Strategy is try and understand in what way we may develop the energy system in a synergic manner, trying to achieve and enhance as much as possible all the goals set out by the National Energy Strategy, but exploiting all the technologies as much as possible. So green gas, sun and wind, it's rather significant figures, but let us consider that an 8 billion cubic meters of biomethane in terms of electric power may represent an amount of 40 terawatt per hour, which is the amount of energy produced with coal in Italy. With reference to the national strategy, I can say that the gas grid, when renewable grow, will have to allow this country to deal with the fact that coal is no longer going to be used. So in 2025, gas is going to be a key element in order to support the system in terms of balancing and supply and energy security, which otherwise would not be possible to guarantee without energy sources that are dispatchable. So I'm very favorably stricken by the emphasis you placed on the opportunities and the potential of green gas, because this is actually something that can be further enhanced as producing the greatest possible synergy between the power and the gas grids.
Faccio io la terza domanda.
So let me ask the third question. So the authority regulates grids, decides dispatching rules. GS spoke about guaranteed prices that were always a topic important for regulators and the authorities, and even more so now with legislative decree number 28. And we hope that the ministry is going to provide further guidelines on this. Anyway, then there are the guidelines on state aid. We'll have to also set out what contributions by the state are. So the role of legislators is very important. Why, perhaps, is the question you would like to ask. No, I'm not asking why, because, of course, the law establishes this. And the last element I forgot to mention, the authority, according to the law that it established it, also decides the conditions for promoting competition. So the natural gas market is marked by the production, the endogenous production of gas. So how can we combine all these things in light of what the regulators have to say? Well, first I wanted to thank the CIB for inviting me, also because what I heard this morning was very interesting. in the sense that we want natural gas, electric power. There is waste, of course, waste which is actually raw materials, but we're only going to focus on domestic waste. Anyway, I don't work in this sector, but concepts such as the carbon battery, the imports of CO2 are all notions that even for a person who's not an expert, lead to very interesting reflections. And I have to say that the carbon battery is a very evocative element, and that leads, it refers to self-sufficiency, to the idea of self-sufficiency, and this is very important for Italy, and I will explain why batteries are so important for this country. Anyway, if I had to say what the authority does, well, in this case too, I would have to make reference to a scenario that was already illustrated this morning. So a system integrator. I think the AB person was saying we provide system integration. Well, yes, we do try and define rules so that the system can work in an integrated manner. What are the problems in an integrated system? Well, Marco mentioned them this morning and somebody else did. But there are many renewable energy sources, and then makes it difficult to control the system. I would like to make an example. There are some decrees that regulate dispatchment in the islands, and so islands in Italy are quite a unique system.
Quello è il modo con cui le isole funzioneranno.
So there are batteries, and there's going to be the FER. Italy is not an island, but of course it does have difficulties in terms of imports. And it may be compared to an island. It means that we need to make the most of opportunities and potential. We need to manage all this energy in a flexible way. It's evident that biogas production plants want to work continuously, but still we can call for a certain amount of flexibility. So if there are price imbalances, flexibility is important. And this has to do with the flexibility of plants. But the battery that was mentioned this morning is very important because it moves electric power to gas. We know that there are problems in storing energy, electric power. Think of the batteries of our mobile phones. But the fact that you can use power to gas is very important because gas, as we were saying, can be stored much more easily than electric power. So this is a principle we should be working further on in the future in order to find solutions that are also financially applicable and viable. So if we look at this element of integration, if we look at the electric power side, okay, once I have made a connection, the gas aspect is easier to manage because the gas grid has a certain amount has a certain ability to absorb variations. So there is almost an unlimited ability to store. But with electric power, things are different. So increasingly, these plants will have to become smart. And fortunately, smartness will cost less and less. So this is going to be an important element in the creation of these plants. These plants must be controllable, and these controls have to be managed in a coordinated manner. So this is more or less what we do, dispatchment, prices. Why? Because the role of the authority is to make markets work seamlessly. Sometimes we have to regulate things, as in the case of minimum guaranteed prices. This is a pseudo regulation, but our main task consists in allowing markets to function. That's because we all believe that the market is what produces the best solutions, and this passes through a gradual development of intelligence, distributed intelligence. So you start with big plants, distribution, and then you have to move forward to a different and more fragmented scenario. Another rather relevant part that is not so much considered today, which is the integration of these sources, is the risk represented by the counterpart. So with these investments, you need to have the coverage of incentives. These are not the responsibility of the authority, but incentives make it possible for a plant to be financed, maybe because the plant is new and innovative, but even though a plant was already on the market, there's a second aspect. Markets are very volatile, and they do not provide multi-year coverage, because if you look at the way in which people buy electric power, well, they do not buy things for 10 years to come. So another element we need to work on in the future is capacity marketing. And we did not hear much about it because it's still a notion that is a bit far away from these small plants. But capacity market is already an answer. So when these plants will be on the market by themselves, because they will no longer need incentives, and also because there are going to be environmental policies that introduce carbon taxes or other elements, so they internalize externalities, not necessarily by providing direct incentives, there will still be a problem which the markets must solve. And in this connection, there is a big debate in Europe concerning coverage. So the integration elements which we see for this type of plants and markets are the two I was referring to. On the one hand, the integration in the functioning on a day-by-day basis, so storage, dispatchability, flexibility, and the other, from an economic standpoint, is a problem that is not so evident today because it has been solved by incentives. There is a guaranteed price, or there is some other type of financial support. There is also, so it solves a number of problems concerning differences in prices between production and sale. So this problem in the future could, on the other hand, become a rather significant problem. And this is what the authority has done in terms of guaranteed price, minimum guaranteed prices, to give some stability to the market, getting to the final consumer with certain prices.
Grazie Massimo Ricci.
Thank you, Massimo Ricci. So, GB, no questions for you. We just hand the floor over to you. That's really embarrassing. I wanted to address two topics, two questions. One, to follow on the lines of what we heard earlier and what we heard this morning. I won't even talk about the transportation sector. I agree on everything that was said here about the potential, about the applications of biomethane, so there's no need to reinforce what's been said. Even the proposals that have been debated in Europe are currently highlighting this. We are going towards an organization of the energy system where local energy communities, distribution systems will be a very important element of the energy system. This, of course, reinforces the role of the sources that guarantee reliability of production. And this is even more true when the grid is small. So microgrids will paradoxically be easier to compensate. It's easier to compensate a small grid than a bigger grid because some changes in demand, even minor changes in demand, will be enough to cause problems. And I would like to add my contribution to the debate by saying that I see three options to guarantee the stability of supply. First, production of bioenergy. For a number of remarks that were made, I think that the production of biogas is the one that will be ruling in the near future. For its dimensions as well, because the dimension of the megawatt is the optimum reference point. But I don't want to forget geothermal Because when we think of geothermal, we think of large-scale geothermal, whereas if we consider also small-scale, medium-scale geothermal, we realize that both might contribute, depending on the local conditions. So it might be easier somewhere else to have a biogas because maybe there's a digester, agriculture done right. In other cases, it will depend on the costs. And we must not forget that developing batteries will add a third component. This was the first option. The second option regards the seasonal rebalancing. So the imbalance can be easily simulated.
Nel 2030, non parliamo del 2015.
So this is becoming a problem that needs ad hoc management. I don't think that Terno, with the current situation, will be able to manage this scenario. We've been carried out a study including two alternatives. The first one is the power to gas, but there's a second one that is pumping installations, not the traditional ones that are located in northern Italy, but those that can be realized in southern Italy, in the islands. And I think that at the end of the day, the market will decide. The market will decide which one of the two will be more easily realized. It's already tested technology, so there's no difficulty there, no programmable sources, are low marginal costs, so we are the ideal solution for a pumping station. But we have to find the right places in southern Italy that have enough water resources, considering that, of course, water will become more and more scarce in the future. So I'm placing everything on the carpet. I don't know which one of these will be. Then there's a new technology that hasn't been tested yet, and the cost-benefit analysis is one of the most important elements to elaborate it on, which doesn't have these problems, but it needs testing, so it's going to be a very interesting scenario, will be an interesting game, and competition will encourage to improve both solutions. And I think this is the historical experience that we have. And the very last remark regarding what I see to be the most important need for biogas done right, for biomethane, that is to say, time. Bruce, yesterday, stressed that very clearly. The time factor plays a role because, for example, the problem of supporting agriculture where there is agriculture, creating new options where 2 billion people will be added to the current population, and then Africa, Asia, well, we need to feed undernourished people that are not few in these countries. And unless we start with sustainable agriculture, we won't make it. We will make it in terms of development, agricultural production, and environmental sustainability. So the time factor is a very important factor, but with us as well. And this is a problem to focus on because apart from current conditions, we repeated that more than once. The two decrees are still missing, the one on biomethane and one of renewables, electricity and photovoltaic. And hopefully next time we meet, we will be able to talk about these decrees. But this is slowing down a process that should rather be sped up. But there's a bigger problem. The biogas done right model is a methodological proposal. It's not a standardized address. Every specific situation, soil characteristics, climate, availability of water, the type of traditional production will force you to reinvent the optimum solution that allows you to obtain these results. So what's the problem here? I was thinking of the Italian case, but we have a large portion of the agricultural production that is small farms whose size are not suitable for biogas done right. And so they need to join forces with bigger firms, and I think that some regulatory tools that might provide tax benefits could be a good solution. Somebody mentioned agriculture 4.0, which is an impeccable definition. But just like Industry 4.0, in a country where small and medium-sized enterprises play the lion's share, competence centres were created, and rightly so. Otherwise, small and medium-sized enterprises in Italy won't make it. They will miss the train of international competitiveness. Something similar should be done in the field of biogas done right. And I realize it's more difficult to have competence centres in this field because we know that agrarian research is not in great shape right now in our country. But there are still resources available. I'm thinking of the research centre of the Ministry for Agricultural Activities. I'm thinking of the National Research Institute. I'm thinking of universities. This is just a suggestion I'm coming up with. I think that CIB, that promoted and successfully so the biogas done right model, should now promote equally successfully competence centres. Not everyone has the ability to look ahead. Those who promoted the biogas done right must help others to understand the potential of biogas done right. This is the new model that CIB should bring forward. The potential is there. Agrarian faculties, although not in good shapes, are well located in Italy, so they can give advice to local conditions, and it's a model that can be easily exported. Let's not forget, because if we want these 2 billion people to be born and the other billions of people that are undernourished to have sustainable agriculture on time, we need way more excellent centres and competence centres to get to these results in a useful time. Thank you very much. Thank you. I thank you all. Let's move on to the agricultural side of the panel. So, thank you very much to all our guests.
Lo lascio a te però,
Sì, lo lascio a me. Allora, Bene, scusate. Abbiamo un po' di cambiamento di programma. Siamo in...
We have a slight change to the program. We are creative today. First of all, Minister Galletti is not going to be here, but he sent a video, and we will send it to you. Unfortunately, Dr. Carrettoni from the Ministry of the Environment can't be here, but we have here Mr. Luca Bianchi from the Ministry of Agriculture, Ettore Prandini, Vice President of Coldiretti, and Massimiliano Giansanti from Confagricoltura. So, to wrap up yesterday's work, I will make a few remarks and then I will hand the floor over to the three speakers that we conclude our works. So the title we chose is Back to Earth. Back to Earth to reinforce the concept that anaerobic digestion in agriculture must be done and is successful when the farm is central in the project. Back to Earth because we highlighted that with the digester and with the agronomy of the biogas done right, that takes the best of conservative agriculture, we can create a carbon negative agriculture with fewer chemicals, regardless of the energy viewpoint, and thereby creating more competitiveness in the primary sectors. So, it is exactly the opposite of what we might think. Biogas is not driving farms apart from agriculture, but they're actually bringing farms closer to agriculture to make everything they do meaningful. We asked international experts to comment on this new solution, and our friends from abroad have confirmed that this model can be easily exported. It is a dress to be custom made, but we have always been good tailors here in Italy, so we can custom make this dress everywhere, and this is the message we would like to convey. Food and fuel, food and energy, this is not an opportunity. Food and energy is a need, it's a necessity. If we want to move on along this path where agriculture becomes more sustainable. I had an idea looking at the numbers that Alessandro Marangoni published and presented today. These are important numbers that have to do with the positive impact of our sector, starting from what we did, starting from what we presented with the experience of our businesses. Well, I believe that a microeconomic study on the investments that are made in the energy sector, in the food sector, should be carried out. I think we would find out extraordinary things. We would find out that biogas over the last 7 to 8 years has generated investments in the primary sector that are incredibly important. I see many friends here, Carlo Vanzetti, first and foremost. Every time we meet, he reminds me of how much he paid for the new stable he had built. Just to go back to the slide. This is a summary of what we've been saying. Biogas and agriculture in Italy and in Germany. 2 approaches, 2 different models. The German model from 2008 to 2015 saw an increase in the production of renewable gas with an increase in the maize service to insulate, so to be used for the digester. In Italy, there's been a decrease of these percentages, despite the tremendous growth in the production of renewable gases. And why? Because our companies have begun using more livestock effluents, more byproducts, more integration solutions. Tomorrow, maybe we will use products that can be used as food for humans. So we have lots of things to exploit, lots of potential to exploit. Yesterday, Mr. Honorable Lavia reassured us on the biomethane decree. We're not going to talk about this until it comes back to Italy.
È il nostro primo obiettivo strategico.
This is our first strategic objective. But the reflections we made this afternoon on the value of anaerobic digestion as a potential energy source that is programmable must be considered in a support path for the electrical component. How the production of renewable energy can be intensified in plants that are closely linked to our farms, and this is a path that must be strategically brought forward. So the identity of CIB emerged very clearly. We are a group of farms that want to continue doing their job and want to continue doing their job in an innovative vision. And this is our path, and I will now hand it over to Luca Bianchi, whom I thank for being here, head of department, and the person that is considering possible future scenarios. Thank you.
Grazie a tutti, buon pomeriggio.
Thank you and good afternoon. I am the only ministry representative here, and my ministry is proud to be an active member and part in the pathway that this country has to follow with reference to the use of biomass. So why is agriculture more and more central in this theme? Well, because we have increasingly focused on the topic of interconnection. So other speakers have recalled it, a plant is not just an element providing supply for power generation purposes, and it's not even something that has to do with environmental sustainability, but it's also important from an economic standpoint to support a farm from an economic standpoint. So thanks to these integration, which is inevitable between farming and the environment, it takes advantages of the circular economy, which is an investment that is essential for a modern farmer. And considering sustainability not just from an energy viewpoint, but as a theme which is essential to evaluate the opportunities of farming, allows us to turn things the other way around, which we have been trying to do as the Ministry for Agricultural Policies. So when you have to pass decrees on renewable energy sources, you cannot simply focus on energy efficiency purely looking at costs and benefits, how much it costs to set up a plant and the energy it's going to produce in a modern economy. which is focused on the topic of innovation and environmental sustainability as essential, we have to consider all the various factors and positive and negative externalities in the plans we create. Otherwise, there is no future for agriculture. When there was Expo Milan, we talked about agriculture for 6 months with reference to sustainability. But when in doing that, we have to consider that the agricultural sector is a great potential supplier of renewable energy sources, and at the same time, we have to consider in our country there are critical situations where we have many industrial plants with intensive farming, where managing agricultural waste is a big problem in terms of the environmental sustainability of an area. But then if you look at these problems within a circular economy, using the opportunities that are afforded by waste conversion plants, what may initially seem to be a problem may be turned into a solution in terms of managing livestock effluents, but that can also enhance the economic sustainability of the agricultural system. So this, of course, requires choices to be made. We have said so, we have raised this issue in the various roundtables, and if in the field of, and if Italy wants to make the biomass something strategic within the context of its national development and energy strategy, it has to consider these elements. It means that we have to reconsider many of the decisions that were made in the past. There is a certain amount of well, let's say that the national energy strategy did not, for instance, sufficiently consider the theme and the potential of biomass. And we produced a document on this that was developed with all the agriculture sector organizations. There are many representatives here. So we developed this document with all the sector organizations so that this theme could be brought back onto the arena. And the challenge is continuing to promote biomass plants over the years to come. And naturally, we want to be the first to say that they have to be balanced in the sense that they have to be adapted to the farms in which they are built. We have to go in the direction of the second generation plants, but these processes have to be accompanied by adequate incentives. Then it is the task of decision makers to focus resources depending on strategic advice by the ministries. And we, as the Ministry of Agricultural Policies, believe that this is a strategic sector, not just from an energy perspective, but also in order to modernize in Italian agriculture. This is the approach we adopted in facing this theme. In the past few days, there has been a debate over the new decree on renewable energy sources, and we basically raised three main themes. The first being the maintaining sufficient funding in line with the last decree that was devoted to the theme of biomass. We want to continue adopting the same strategy in the sense that we want to focus resources on small plants, because this is the best science for the agricultural sector. We want to get to a level of incentives per plant size capable of promoting the aggregation of several farms with a single plant, so that it may be used in a most effective manner. So we're not afraid of tackling a system that is made up of players of different size, let's say farms with different amounts of waste and livestock effluence. So we want to decide the size of our plants based on all these factors, and also considering the positive externalities that may come and the need for taking action in this system. We want to maintain a tariff level capable of ensuring the economic balance or viability of a plant. So to be concrete, we have been discussing these themes on a daily basis, and with the Ministry of Economic Development, we have set up an operational team, which is very positive. Of course, there is a problem in terms of timings. I'm fully aware of this, because as a ministry, we need to accelerate the pathway leading to the approval of these decrees, because you know that red tape is quite long. So we have to make sure that we can produce a shared text document to send to the European Commission in order to put an end to this situation which is creating problems to Italy. And this theme is central to us. It is essential in a broader strategy. So somebody was talking about agriculture 4.0, but this is a part of in the innovation of our agricultural system. I think that data concerning the Italian primary sector recently published, particularly if we look at it from the standpoint of the various chains, the agri-food sector, shows that this is a sector that is not just one of the backbones of our economic system, but it is also one of the most advanced ones that can help us, this country, come out of the serious crisis that has affected it. So the challenge of environmental and economic sustainability is a challenge that the farming sector must rise up to, and the many experiences made in the north and in the south of this country in terms of farms tell us that the modern farmer knows to do many things, because he's not just a farmer, he's also a tourist operator, he's a person who innovates and adopts a multifaceted approach. So the success that we have achieved so far is the result precisely of this. We will commit ourselves to continuing along this way. There are also very important tasks we have to carry out in the months to come. But anyway, we work on a daily basis on this pathway in order to give this sector the right importance, because it is essential in the development of this country.
Grazie Luca.
Thank you, Luca. You gave us some positive news concerning this theme, and you gave us reason to be optimistic. I was underscoring the fact that these 2 days saw the participation of over 400 people, and so many companies, which are our members, have supported this conference, even though we have no additional funding. And this is again a proof of how important this initiative is considered by the sector. I want to greet our two colleagues who work for the Ministry of Agriculture, and this is very important to me, because at the end of the day, what we have done in the past few years was very important, and I wish to further thank you for what you will be able to do in the period to come. I'm now giving the floor to Ettore Brandini, Vice President of Coldiretti. I thank him for being here, and we are very happy that he is here. Over the past days, we have talked about many topics, and so I'm particularly grateful for your presence here. First of all, thank you for inviting me and for giving me the opportunity of speaking a strategy that my organization is implementing. As far as we are concerned, we need to face problems also from an economic standpoint. So today, integration between energy production, biogas or biomethane plants gives us the opportunity of facing economic crises that our companies, farm enterprises encountered in the various production sector. If we look at the livestock sector and the dairy sector, there have been ups and downs in the past few years. And today, for a farm, having the chance of entering the energy market with a diversified production, well, this allows the company to amortize problems when economic difficulties come up. So, you were talking about renewable energy. Well, I think that we did make some mistakes in the past years, especially when we speak about, for instance, land-based photovoltaic farms. This is not what we're interested in. We want to invest on aspects that are directly linked to the farm. Photovoltaic plants are fine as long as we put them on roofs, but not when we cover farmland with them. Today we speak about new types of incentives, but we cannot forget existing plans, of course. So we have to think things over. This is necessary. We need to think. We need to try and understand how to manage these future incentives. I want to get back to what Luca Bianchi was saying, and we have worked together very effectively. And if sometimes we say that the three ministries should cooperate more, also with reference to aspects such as economic development, the environment and agriculture, we still need to thank agriculture for its role. We have to thank the ministry for what it did, because if today we can say that we are almost there with the new decree on incentives, and maybe in the next few days we will be able to send this to Brussels so that we can start becoming operational, opening up registers. Well, this is a result of the fact that agriculture has played a very important role, putting the various ministries under pressure in raising issues that play a central role. There is a theme, and that's that of synergies. This is something which is more and more necessary today. It would be very wrong to act individually. We have to act as the agricultural sector, but also in cooperation with that part of the industrial sector that invests and creates and sets up plants. So the production chain involves all our country. If we do not consider, let's say, the engines within the plants, all the rest is provided by Italian companies, by the Italian economy. We cannot put this aside. There is also another important theme from the standpoint of development and synergies. We have been working with Terna, again in the field of sustainable and environmentally friendly energy production. This, I think, can be extended also to that aspect that was mentioned by the previous roundtable. In other words, creating the opportunity for individual companies to set up plants. But in the case of small farms, it could be possible to create plants that are part of a consortium made up by several smaller farms. And then there is the aspect, the environmental aspect. We are very much aware that EU regulations which will set up some constraints for farms will be particularly difficult in the case of cattle raising farms, which are located mainly in the north of Italy. So every day we are told, for instance, about the pollution level in the Po Plain. If we do not consider this aspect, and if we do not do something as the agricultural sector, well, this would be the biggest mistake we can make, because once again we put ourselves in the position of being looked at as the culprits, when this is not the case. At least we're not the only culprits. Of course, part of our responsibilities are there, but the farming and cattle raising sector do have some responsibilities. We have to take them. So our companies must make some investments in energy production and give a double answer, in the sense that we want to protect the environment, but we want to protect our farms as well economically. And this also leads us to take a step ahead, a step forward. And I'm referring to the type of agriculture we would like to have. We nowadays, in the winemaking sector, we have very big companies and important ones that are turning from traditional to organic farming. When this transition occurs, we know that everything that is used in terms of chemicals can no longer be used if you go organic. So, for instance, the use of digestates, well, up until a few years ago, we saw some products as a byproduct. We want to use this to become an added value, and we don't just want to use that in the winemaking sector, but in the entire agricultural sector. And we want to give concrete answers to environmental issues. Think of the desertification of some production areas in our country. We're not talking, of course, about a desertification stage linked to the fact that it does not rain. It is the result of the fact that there has been an impoverishment of the soil because there was an overuse of chemicals. So digestate in this connection can become a value. So if we were to implement plans at the local and territorial level, we might give an answer also to these issues. I don't want to take up any more of your time. I wish to thank those who invited me here today, but I want to give you a message, and that is, as Coldiretti, as an organization, we are absolutely ready to work on any topic that is necessary to give concrete answers to the needs of farms, which today are unique in their production in terms of excellence at world level.
Grazie Ettore.
Thank you, Ettore.
Do adesso la parola.
I'm now giving the floor to the National President of Confagricoltura, Massimiliano Giansanti, a friend whom I thank for being here. And I also wish to thank you and the Confederation for all the work you have supported us with in the biogas sector. Thank you.
Grazie Piero.
Thank you, Piero. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm very happy to be here for a number of reasons.
I will start from some facts and figures. In 2007, 26 of you were generating renewables, producing renewables. After 11 years, is more than 1,500. So in 10 years, there was a tremendous growth in biogas. And I think it's something you have to have acknowledged, because it's been difficult years. It's been years where the growth of the sector was opposed from many sides. Let's say that very clearly. It's been years before getting to the famous 28 cents. There were tricky years, lots of resistance. Then somebody realized that the sector of circular economy, the sector of economy that regenerates itself, it's an important sector. But the entrepreneurs realized it in the first place because they found in this activity a source of diversification of their income. Thanks to biogas, many producers are still surviving thanks to biogas, because quite often it's biogas is actually helping them heal their accounts. So I think that over the past 10 years, Confagricoltura did a lot for the development of the sector. These 10 years have been years where Confagricoltura, and you know that very well, you're almost all members of our association, where we have made efforts all together, because we always believed that the sector of renewables is one of the activities on which the future of our sector depends, which is not a future that there's not a sector that looks at primary production only, but it's a sector that looks at provision of energy from primary sources. So I think we should applaud the news that the University of Pisa, after more than 20 years of experimentation, has said that GMOs are not detrimental for our health, are not posing a danger to our health. So this is a challenge of the future. We've been saying this for years. Science, progress must not scare us, because science and progress, especially in agriculture, have allowed us to produce more on smaller plots of land. Think about all the benefits of GMOs in biodigesters, because when we talk about biodigestate, and I think we fought our battles on biodigestate as well, because people wanted to dispose of it in landfills. Now we are bringing it to the countryside. It's a very important fertilization potential. So we have to identify clearly what's the competitiveness of Italian agriculture. It's a field that is marking important results in terms of exports, 40 billion. But imports of primary goods from abroad have increased as well. So we are a country that is processing more and more and is producing less. But the question is why? Because we're not competitive. Because our sector wasn't able to renew itself over the years. You did it better than others, and now you're ready to rise up to the challenges of the future. Because if the businesses that have relied on innovation, on research, that have traveled around Europe to see what was the best technology out there, well, businesses that have studied how to improve their land, to improve their crops, to improve rotations, to bring benefits through an equitable and fair exploitation of land. So the message that we're trying to convey, going back to sustainability, going back to the fertility of the ground, is an essential component of the future development of this extraordinary sector. Some difficult years are ahead of us, and all together we will have to challenge who's making decisions, so the government. The challenge is biomethane. The challenge for the future is biomethane, because in terms of environment and the goals set in Paris by 2030, there are a number of questions we should ask ourselves. Where are we willing to bring our country? When it comes to the transportation of agricultural produce with the trucks that maybe are fueled by biomethane. SNAM, CNH, and other organizations have signed an MOU to further develop biomethane in Italy. If we wanted to systematize our biomethane production, 12% of biomethane supply in Italy could be generated through renewables. So think about the future developments of renewables. We are encountering some resistance there, and hopefully the decree will be passed soon. And as Piero said, let's not talk about it, because maybe something good is coming. We are ready with our firms. You are ready with your firms. But we have to think of how making sure that the existing plants will become part of the system, because probably they won't be recognized with the famous 28 cents. I met Minister Calenda more than once, and he told me very clearly our government has no will in supporting renewables for the production of energy, but there's availability in reconversion to biomethane. We have to protect your interests to make sure this happens, and competitiveness system we were referring to earlier, because everything has to be brought back to competitiveness. Biomethane could be a factor of tremendous development, not only for northern Italy, because biomethane is an instrument that allows also southern Italian regions to find a solution. For example, when they can't have durum wheat crops. By a conclusion, we are an important sector of the Italian economy. 18% of GDP. We are the first item of national economy from the fields to the table. A primacy that we have to keep, a leadership that we have to keep, and I think that the biggest effort is to share common paths. And I heard some very important words from the Vice President of Coldiretti. I'm very pleased. It's the second time that I hear words like these from a farmer, from Coldiretti. When I hear Coldiretti talking about these questions, I'm pleased, because farmers, speak to farmers is definitely easier. This being said, I think that the challenge of the future is to find a new future for our agriculture. And this is no joke. We made no mistakes in the past, because even photovoltaic on land had its benefits, because in many regions of Italy, in areas where it was difficult to produce, photovoltaic plants were built that actually brought profits to the farmers that had them built in the first place. Then there are speculations, of course, but this is everywhere. The people that have wanted to promote biogas in sectors that were not agriculture, but this happens in every sector. We really care about agriculture. We exchange views every day on agriculture. Thank you all for everything that you've been doing and you will be doing in the future. Let me thank the CIB, because for the past 10 years, CIB and Confagricoltura did great things together, and we will do as many great things. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Massimiliano. At this point, I would like to ask you for one more minute. We're going to show the video of Minister Galletti, who's going to extend a welcome to our assembly since he couldn't be here. It should be ready. The video is not going to be translated.
Vi ringrazio prima di tutto per avermi invitato a partecipare al vostro convegno di Biogas Italy. Impegni istituzionali purtroppo mi hanno impedito di partecipare ai vostri lavori. Mi congratulo con il consorzio italiano Biogas e con Ecomondo K-Energy per avere promosso questa giornata su un tema che è fondamentale. È un tema fondamentale per l'agricoltura italiana, ma io dico di più, è un tema fondamentale per l'economia italiana. Oggi siamo secondi in Europa nella produzione di biogas, questo grazie a un impegno forte vostro, e questo fa bene all'ambiente, perché il biogas ci aiuta a combattere le emissioni climalteranti e dall'altra parte, per quanto riguarda l'agricoltura, compensa gli inevitabili danni che provengono dalla zootecnia, in particolare all'ambiente. Io credo che davanti abbiamo una grandissima sfida, che è quella dell'agricoltura sostenibile. Sempre di più dobbiamo puntare su questo, e voi siete una parte fondamentale di questo progetto che abbiamo. D'altra parte, proprio in tutti i documenti che come Ministero abbiamo approvato in questi anni, l'agricoltura è una parte fondamentale delle misure che noi abbiamo messo in campo per raggiungere gli accordi di Parigi, e il biogas fa parte di questa strategia che abbiamo messo in atto in questi anni. Quindi vi auguro buon lavoro e spero che continuate nel solco che avete percorso fino ad ora.
So an applause to the Minister. just sent us this message. It's been years where the Ministry of the Environment played a key role. Now we will conclude these 2 very interesting days. I would like to thank all the participants. I would like to thank the sponsors. I would like to thank the attendants, but above all, I would like to thank our team, Christian, and all those who worked very hard for this event. See you next year.